Michael Douglas is more than just a legendary figure in film. Over the course of 50 years, he has embodied the tenacity, legacy, and unwavering spirit of Hollywood. His name is woven into the very fabric of cinematic history, thanks to his iconic appearances in Wall Street and Fatal Attraction, as well as his 2 Academy Award wins. Behind the spotlight, however, was a guy who fought against stage 4 illness that destroyed his body, suffered from a broken marriage, was publicly betrayed by his own son, and bore the unimaginable weight of being a father who is split between grief and guilt. A profession built on the foundation of a renowned name, a private existence held together by sacrifice and silence, and a childhood deprived of warmth. This is just the start of a much worse tale than the screen ever showed. At 80 years old, Michael Douglas is currently living through a more terrible chapter than any character he has ever played. Time, memory, and disease become inseparable companions in a house full of echoes, as it descends quietly into quietness. Tap like as a modest but sincere homage to a guy who gave all and lost more than the world can ever know if his path has ever moved you. He was a lonely youngster caught between 2 worlds before he became a legend. One of her who demanded more than he could provide, and one of fame that neglected to nurture. He was born into a tradition. But when you're a kid looking for a home, legacy can feel like a cage. The world felt stardom was inevitable for Michael Douglas, the son of Bermudian actress Diana Dill and Hollywood titan Kirk Douglas. Beneath the glittering expectations and gilded surname, however, was a youngster who didn't understand why his father didn't visit him very often, why the cheers were louder than the stories spoken before bed, why love could appear like distance at times. I was constantly attempting to emerge from his shadow. In 2016, Michael came clean about his past under the watchful eye of his father, who lived to reach 103 and died in 2020. However, leaving wasn't simple. Kirk Douglas was more than just a well-known figure. He was the man who fought his way from poverty to fame in the post-war heyday of filmmaking. He was the son of Russian Jewish immigrants, stern, aloof, iconic, and emotionally inaccessible. Michael's parents divorced when he was only 7 years old, after their marriage amicably broke down. From that point on, he rarely saw his father outside of vacations, brief interactions that just made the emotional distance wider. He was less of a physical presence and more of an idea. Michael later acknowledged that he would come to view William Dared, his stepfather, as his real father figure. "I didn't realize I needed the love my stepfather offered me," he said once. After Diana remarried, Michael spent the most of his early years with a guy who attended school plays, showed up for supper, and provided the quiet support that his biological father was never able to provide. Just as the last, bloodiest stages of World War II were beginning, Michael was born in September 1944. The world was broken, and was his home in many respects. Diana raised their kid between New York and the windswept beaches of Bermuda, while Kirk was frequently abroad in Hollywood chasing fantasies. On some holidays, there were no phone calls and vacant chairs. He famously remarked, "People think being born into fame is a blessing. I didn't feel royal as a child, though. I felt isolated as a child." Michael's ancestry was rooted in responsibility and authority on his mother's side. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Melville Dill, his grandfather, was a member of Parliament, the head of the island's militia, and the Attorney General of Bermuda. Thomas Newell Dill, his great-grandfather, served as Hamilton's mayor and judge. And further back, aboard a Bermudian-built ship, Captain Thomas Melville Dill braved the Atlantic, before dying in a wreck off the coast of England. These were men of history, status, and responsibility. The family carried expectations in addition to titles. Thus, Michael was never only a child from his earliest recollections. He carried the flame of 2 empires, the one of Parliament halls and the old marine winds, and the other of celluloid and spotlights. Too much for a child still discovering himself. Hollywood aristocracy, Bermudian nobility, Jewish ancestry, and American celebrity. He went to prestigious schools: Eaglebrook, Massachusetts, Allen Stevenson, New York, and Chott, Connecticut. It appeared to be a golden route on paper. It frequently felt like exile in his heart. "I had no idea which version of myself I should be. The actor's son, the heir to the island, or the invisible child in the back of the limousine," he further stated. Prior to the accolades and recognition, Michael Douglas was a nomadic student in California who strayed between classes and unanswerable issues. He said, "I didn't choose acting because I was passionate about it," in an interview from 1994. "I didn't know what else to pick, so I went with it." Almost by accident, Michael enrolled in dramatic arts while attending the University of California, Santa Barbara in the middle of the 1960s. Because it was the one department that didn't make him feel inferior, not because he was driven by ambition. At first, his talent did not impress, but his name opened doors. His father, the iron-jawed Hollywood great Kirk Douglas, watched his son's performances with icy disinterest when he started landing early jobs. Years later, Michael recalls, "He told me I was terrible. That sting, more than anything else, lit the first real fire inside him. He started pushing himself harder, studying the craft seriously, stripping away entitlement and ego. I realized I had to earn it. Not just the roles, but even the right to be seen," he continued. Not in a tough love way, just embarrassing. However, the journey was lengthy. His early Hollywood years were a haze of unmemorable cameos and lingering looks from people who thought he would fail. He wasn't a natural like some. He lacked the innate talent his father displayed on screen. But he did have grit and a silent vow he made to himself, to escape the shadow without destroying its source. Then, in 1975, everything changed. His father had long owned the film rights to Ken Kesey's novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But Kirk was unable to make it. Actors turned down the project, studios passed, and the dream faded. At the age of 31, Michael asked for the rights. The film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and Michael, who wasn't even credited as an actor in it, won his first Oscar as a producer. Kirk reluctantly handed them over, thinking the project would die quietly. Instead, Michael put together a team, teamed up with producer Saul Zaentz, and made the impossible happen. "It felt like I had stolen something sacred," Michael once said. "It was the best and worst moment of my life." That win didn't instantly heal their relationship, but it proved something important. Michael wasn't just Kirk's son. He was a force to be reckoned with. The irony was not lost on anyone. It was never about outshining Kirk, but rather about surviving him, outlasting the doubt, outworking the whispers, and proving to himself that he belonged, that his legacy would begin not with a name, but with a risk he dared to take when no one thought he could. He was not loud, showy, but relentless, and from that moment on, the world stopped expecting him to be a copy of his father, and began watching the man he was becoming. At one point in time, being in the spotlight didn't feel like a reward, rather it felt like a prison. As the 1980s came to an end, and the 1990s roared in, Michael Douglas was transformed from the son of a legend and the producer who had won an unexpected Oscar to a leading man in the most demanding and dangerous sense of the word. He wasn't just a box office titan thanks to movies like Romancing the Stone, Wall Street, Fatal Attraction, and Basic Instinct. They portrayed him as cruel, cunning, and emotionally cold. Gordon Gekko, Dan Gallagher, and Nick Curran were all characters whose moral compass swung in all directions and whose charm concealed decay, leading the audience to mistake the characters for the real guy. Interviews from the time period reveal a man who was both proud of his work and haunted by it. He later recalled that there were times when he would walk down the street and see people flinch, as if I might suddenly become those guys. It was a heavy, lonely burden. He was praised, yes, and respected, certainly, but he was also misunderstood. He was pigeonholed into darkness. In 1993, he acknowledged that the roles were difficult, but occasionally they left a mark that was difficult to remove. He was frequently cast as the morally complex anti-hero by directors, and studios wanted him to represent danger in a suit. For a while, he seemed to do this with ease, but the cost was growing behind the scenes. Michael stood at the center of a cultural storm, suddenly the face of a new kind of masculinity. Desirable, dangerous, damaged. "It wasn't who I was," he later said. "The pressure to outdo himself, to maintain an edge, to stay relevant." Basic Instinct 1992 was a worldwide phenomenon, but it also sparked controversy. Critics questioned its ethics, and fans became obsessed with its provocations. But I didn't know how to stop being that version of myself. His personal life began to reflect the roles as well. In the midst of the glamour, he began to feel more and more like a man playing a part off screen. The 1990s were actually a crucible, rather than just a time of artistic triumphs. Each role chipped away at something inside him. And even though the accolades kept coming, the applause began to feel like noise, hollow, exhausting. He starred in Falling Down, where his character breaks down under the weight of societal failure. Disclosure, a drama about reverse harassment that sparked heated debates. And The Game, where reality and illusion blur until nothing feels safe. The paradox of Michael Douglas was that the higher he rose, the less visible his true self became, but he continued to work, to show up, to try to find roles that reflected not only society's fears, but his own truths. People think success is freedom, he once said, but sometimes it's just a better decorated cage. By doing this, he paved the way for success and self-doubt, a path that few actors dare to take. If you can relate to that silent struggle, or if you've ever felt invisible beneath your achievements, hit like to let him know that his bravery in bearing the burden of perception wasn't in vain. Despite all the roles he played on screen, nothing prepared Michael Douglas for the one role that broke him the most, that of a father watching his child fall apart. Although he was a Hollywood icon, an Oscar-winning actor, and the pinnacle of success in the public eye, his heart was aching behind closed doors, and no amount of praise could ever heal it. Born in 1978, his son Cameron grew up in the glittering shadows of fame. While the outside world witnessed privilege, Cameron's memoir revealed a childhood of emotional distance, confusion, and loneliness concealed by wealth, where he felt like an outsider in his own family, and yearned for love in a home that was more reliant on ambition than affection. There were times, Michael later acknowledged, when I thought I had lost him completely, and the consequences were devastating. As the years went by, the gap grew wider, as Michael, preoccupied with demanding roles and public scrutiny, found it difficult to connect with his son and comprehend the silent storms simmering behind Cameron's defiant gaze. The collapse was celebrated by the tabloids, but for Michael, it was about helplessness, about seeing his child deteriorate and not being able to stop it. Cameron developed a drug addiction, was arrested several times, and was sentenced to federal prison in 2010, where he spent more than 7 years. Cameron's collapse was more than a personal tragedy. He was no longer the cool-headed celebrity on the red carpet, but a father pacing chilly hallways, waiting for visitation hours, wondering what he could have done differently. You feel like you failed. He once said, no matter how much success you have, it means nothing when your child is suffering. It became Michael's mirror, reflecting his own blind spots and absences, but he never turned away despite the pain. He showed up, wrote letters, sat through hearings, and whispered apologies between plexiglass. Gradually, piece by piece, the father and son started to rebuild what fame had once destroyed. In recent years, their relationship has become a quiet triumph, not of perfection but of perseverance. Cameron, who is now a father himself, has openly shared his journey of healing and reconciliation. And Michael, who has remained changed and humbled, has reflected that forgiveness is the only thing stronger than shame. He now talks less about Hollywood and more about family, being present, listening, and learning. It's too late for some things, but it's never too late for love. Michael Douglas's fatherhood story is ultimately one of return rather than failure. If this silent redemption resonated with you, please click like. In 2010, the man who once embodied power, confidence, and cinematic brilliance faced an enemy he couldn't charm or outwit. This is because sometimes the greatest victories happen far from the cameras, in the silence between a father and son who chose not to give up. However, just when he thought the pain of watching his son fall was the deepest pain he'd ever endured, life delivered a blow that struck even closer to his own body, his own breath, and his own voice. The doctors told Michael Douglas, then 65, that he had stage 4 tongue cancer caused by HPV. It wasn't just a medical report, it was a terrifying prognosis, given in a cold hospital room. The doctors recommended a drastic surgery that would remove part of his jaw and tongue, which could leave him speechless. This diagnosis rocked the foundation of his life. It was unthinkable for an actor whose voice had commanded screens for decades. He would later say that every week brought a new level of pain, so he decided to take the harder route. He endured 7 exhausting weeks of radiation and chemotherapy, and not a day went by without struggle. His weight fell, and more than 40 pounds disappeared from his body. He was unable to swallow, chew, or taste anything solid, so liquid diets became his lifeline. His mouth ulcers were constant. Speaking felt like tearing at open wounds, and even soup burned his throat. Despite this, he refused to be silenced, and his wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, wept in private. His children watched their father deteriorate into a weak man with sunken cheeks and shaking hands. He later admitted, "There were times I thought I wouldn't make it, but if I had to go, I wanted to go fighting." Despite this, Michael continued to attend treatment, his family, and the hope that tomorrow would be a little less painful. On some mornings, he could hardly get out of bed, and on other evenings, he stared at the mirror, wondering if he still recognized the man looking back. Every radiation treatment sapped his energy, memory, and spirit, in addition to attacking the cancer cells. But he persisted, documenting the journey in silence, and never playing the victim since he didn't want sympathy, but rather peace and another chance. That battle became his obsession. During that time, Michael found unexpected strength in silence, meditation, soft music, a gentle touch from his wife, and the smell of clean sheets. He began writing short journal entries, sometimes a single sentence, sometimes longer. "I hate this, but I am still here." Some friends drifted away, and rumors circulated, but the battle was real and lonely inside. He said, "You don't realize how beautiful life is until you're not sure you'll get more of it." Doctors told him that even if he lived, his voice might never recover, but somehow, he managed to keep his voice, which was slower and a little rougher, but it was unmistakably his. When he spoke in public again, no one was shocked. It was more than a comeback. It was a renewal. The man who once stood tall as Gordon Gekko now stood humbled, weathered, and grateful. He had turned away from surgery and stayed present, holding on to the one gift no one could duplicate, his truth. After months of suffering, he was pronounced cancer-free. He emerged from the darkness not triumphant, but transformed. He now eats differently, sleeps more, values silence, laughs louder, and speaks with the weight of a man who has faced his last curtain and survived to tell the story. For a generation that remembers his fierce eyes and commanding voice, to see him now gentler, slower, yet radiant with purpose, is to understand that real strength is surviving when the script says you shouldn't. If his battle moved you, if his resilience reflects life, then Michael has been undergoing routine checkups every 6 months since then. Something you faced, click-like, for the actor, but also for the man who faced the darkest chapter and survived it gracefully. Michael had to face another silent, exhausting battle after years of establishing a career, long before illness would ruin his health, or his son's future would turn into heartache. The unraveling of love, and whether it could be saved before it broke completely, was a story that took place behind closed doors, and between distant hearts, rather than on movie sets or hospital rooms. In 1977, Michael Douglas met Dandra Lucer, a stunning woman who was 14 years his junior and had a diplomatic background. On paper they looked perfect, but behind closed doors, there was a disconnect. And Michael, buried in work and ambition, later acknowledged that he was too young and too self-centered to be a good husband back then. On paper, the cracks were there from the start. They married quickly, and for a while the world watched with approval. The marriage lasted 22 years, but it was not 22 years of harmony. By the end, they were more roommates than lovers, living in the same opulent estate in Majorca, but emotionally separated. They had one son, Cameron, whose future battles with addiction and incarceration would cast long shadows over both parents. Michael admitted, "There were times when we would walk past each other in that house without saying a word." The divorce was finalized in 2000 with a $45 million settlement that made headlines, and Deandra kept a portion of their Majorca estate. Although the tabloid storm was harsh, Michael claimed that the true suffering was not the money or the scandal. But then came Catherine, who was 25 years younger than him, a generational divide that raised eyebrows but never healed hearts. And they met at the Deauville Film Festival in France. He was 56, she was 31, but their bond transcended the numbers. Catherine was radiant, having just starred in The Mask of Zorro. That night, over dinner, he famously said, "I want to father your children." It was bold, perhaps too bold, but Catherine later said it made her laugh and made her curious. Michael pursued her with a quiet sincerity that even his closest friends found surprising. He was older, weathered, and carrying the weight of emotional scars. In 2000, the year his divorce was finalized, they got married. The wedding was a global media event, but behind the fanfare there was something raw and real, one acquaintance said. "It wasn't about conquest," he said. "It was about redemption." Michael stated, "I was striving to do better, not to replace my past." Dylan and Karis were their 2 children together. For a time it appeared that Michael had discovered tranquility, which had escaped him for decades. However, peace does not equate to immunity. Cancer came like a thief in the night into their marriage in 2010. Through every procedure, scan, and silent prayer in antiseptic rooms, Catherine was there for him. But there was a significant emotional cost. The family experienced yet another storm in 2013. Cameron, their son, was incarcerated. Both mentally and physically, Michael was still getting better. Catherine then broke in private, She checked herself into a bipolar disorder treatment facility. The media was brutal. Divorce rumors swirled like vultures. Subsequently, they parted ways without any announcing. I assumed it was finished. However, love can bend without breaking, as Michael subsequently stated. I thought I had lost everything I built with her. A few months later, they started speaking cautiously and slowly once more. Catherine revealed in a rare interview that we realized that maybe, just maybe, we were strong enough to rebuild, if we could survive illness and grief and shame and headlines. And they rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, less polished, but more present, they were reunited in 2014. These days, Michael and Catherine largely avoid the limelight. They divide their time between their Mallorca home and New York. They enjoy vintage movies, cook together, and take leisurely strolls around gardens. The individuals that met in Deauville are not the same. Despite their weariness from battle, they are real mates. It's not the fireworks anymore. It's the candle that stays lit even in the storm. Michael responds with a smile when asked about love today. Because Michael and Catherine didn't just find each other, they chose each other repeatedly, despite all the reasons not to. At 80, Michael Douglas lives in the quiet echo of a legacy hard-earned, not the thunder of applause. If you've ever believed in second chances, in love that fights to survive, then click that like button. After spending decades in the spotlight, surviving stage 4 tongue cancer, and enduring some of the most agonizing chapters a husband and father could go through, Michael now finds peace at home rather than on screen. With an estimated net worth of $350 million, he divides his time between a family villa on the tranquil Bermuda coast and a large, classically modern estate in Westchester, New York, valued at $12 million. That house is more than just real estate, it's memory. He shares his life with Catherine Zeta-Jones and their 2 kids, Dylan and Karis, and spent a portion of his fractured childhood in Bermuda, where the Atlantic wind carried both solitude and introspection. Today, that same breeze fills his lungs with quiet gratitude, rather than fame. While the cameras rarely roll for him now, Michael hasn't vanished. The family frequently travels between the United States and their beloved home in Mallorca, a retreat that offers both privacy and panoramic calm. Michael is also close to his firstborn, Cameron Douglas, who has returned to family life after years of turmoil. Their bond is a quiet healing, not showy, not public, but deeply meaningful. As he once stated in a rare interview, "I've told the stories I needed to tell on screen." He has simply chosen a different stage, one of stillness, reflection, and deliberate presence. He has no major acting projects lined up, not out of loss but of choice. He stepped back from regular acting work in 2022, citing both age and a desire not to die on a film set. He now focuses on producing films and quietly supporting meaningful causes. His once sharp features have aged naturally and elegantly, and his silver hair and softened lines only add gravity to the presence that once electrified Hollywood. He calls himself a retired cinematic soldier. Now I want to live the ones I haven't. The man who once portrayed vicious tycoons and seductive masterminds on screen now prefers swimming to stay fit, healthy meals to red carpets, and family dinners to premieres. His lifestyle is dignified, almost monastic in its simplicity. No social media storms, tabloid spectacles, just books, film archives, walks with Catherine, and evenings gazing out over the ocean. He continues to be active with the Douglas Foundation, which his late father, Kirk, established to support healthcare, education, and the arts. It's not just philanthropy, it's continuity. He no longer chases scripts, but embraces each day with quiet grace. A way to say, "I was here and I helped." Michael survived cancer, but he still bears the scars from the brutal rounds of chemotherapy and radiation. He experienced long-lasting side effects, including weight loss, weakened immunity, and a dulled sense of taste. He once acknowledged that he would never fully return to his former self, but perhaps that was the point. Perhaps you become a softer, wiser version of yourself. He frequently speaks now, not of Hollywood but of history, his own and his ancestors. Perhaps this is why his later years feel less like a retreat and more like a reckoning, a kind, purposeful closing of the curtain. He said, "I carry all of it. I am in many ways the American story. Flawed, trying, forgiving, moving forward." His family's tapestry is rich with light and shadow, ranging from war heroes to shipwrecked captains, from screen legends to wayward sons. Therefore, when we talk about Michael Douglas today, we are not just remembering a man who starred in Wall Street or Fatal Attraction. We see a father who supported his children, a husband who put repair before pride, a son who forgave a distant father, and an artist who knew when to step back, not in defeat, but in dignity. If a movie, an incident, or even just one of his lines ever had an impact on your life, please leave a comment below. We are seeing a man who refused to be defined by his mistakes or his roles. Let it be a nod of acknowledgement, a silent thank you. Legends are remembered for their endurance, not just their accomplishments. Michael Douglas is living on in the stillness, the sea air, and the legacy that becomes stronger with each step he takes away from the limelight.